November 5th? Oh my, 20 more days till Santa G shows up. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison is absent. Ms. Conwell. Here. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Thank you. How are usual? Is there any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. First is Reverend Pinckney.
Welcome, Reverend.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are you the chairperson, Mr. Gallagher?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name, for those who are listening who don't know me, is Reverend Pamela M. Pinckney Butts. I am the State of Ohio chairperson, state director for And Justice for All. And Councilman Gallagher, I'm very angry right now.
Take your time.
For those who feel disrupted, they are being disrupted right now because of a racist agenda. And how this relates to your agenda item. I'd like to know these license plates that you're identifying with, how many of them are actually being used in human trafficking or racial profiling, and many other components. For those who don't know me, I'm the woman who did the invocation, opening prayer, and the initial speech on January the 21st of 2017 on Public Square. And I was violated because of the color of my skin and because I'm not gay. And Mr. Gallagher, when you speak of license plates being used for your process, I think of the fact that I came here previously stating that my grandchildren are missing. Well, they still are. And the system of justice, including the prosecutor's office and public safety, have been using these vehicles to hide my grandchildren from me. My son has been being raped by prison guards, thrown back into this prison system. And then when my son gets out of the system, after my children were stolen from me and robbed from me over 15 years ago, then you have a process that puts license plates in place to target more people for victimization. I had to walk to the hospital yesterday with pneumonia because with these license plates and this process, I was told that a case was open in reference to my grandchildren October 20th. Well, I was told recently that my grandchildren are not even in Cuyahoga County. I'm asking you, chairperson, since I can't get anything done through my representative, I'm asking you to ask Sheriff Pinckney and this license plate process to do a formal investigation and prosecute everyone in the Sheriff's Department, the Department of Children and Family Services, and their hands in this license plate process. And please find my grandchildren and my children. Thank you.
Thank you. In your packet, you have the minutes of November 21st.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. We have one more. for
Oh,
public
I'm
comment.
sorry.
Mr. Eric Upperman. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the council members. I'm Eric Upperman. I'm the Chief of Police of Fairview Park Police Department. I am on the license plate reader committee that has been working over the request for proposal and working on vendors and all the process there. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments in reference to what was said by the ACLU member at the last meeting as far as what exactly the plate reader will pick up. I believe Ms. Carney has given you copies of some of the reading the actual pictures of the plates. Do you have those in your packet?
We do. Actually, Chief, I intend to go through this with Ms. Carney again.
Okay.
So why don't you just stand next to her if you have anything else to add?
Okay,
I think
okay,
we're moving to where we need to be.
okay,
And quite honestly, I wanted to make sure everybody was here that had a stake or a say, which is why everybody was invited. And from what I understand, the policies and procedures are still being worked on. And we're looking to address all the concerns of the ACLU as well as those that are going to be administering the plate system itself.
okay,
So I want to get us to at a comfort level, once I see the policies and procedures, which again aren't done yet,
okay,
but will be done.
all right.
But if there's something else
Well,
you have that,
I just do want to just make one comment, and I
Sure.
don't know if that'll be brought up in your questioning with Ms. Carney, is that we've already been doing this for 8 years. There's
Right.
been no wrongdoing, no allegation or hint that anybody's doing anything. Every person who uses it is logged, and it isn't something new. It's just that now, instead of ones that move around where we could actually target a location specifically anytime we want, it's going to be
Right.
at a stationary location.
and that's a good point, because I don't think a lot of folks understand. I'm from Strongsville, and I can tell you this: if you're on a main street in Strongsville, you're on a camera.
Correct.
And they maintain that for the purposes of if indeed there was an abduction or a crime of some sort, that they would have access to that video.
Just between Strongsville and Lakewood, there's probably 80 cameras in 80 locations between
Right.
intersections and business districts that are 24/7 monitored with live video.
Right. So, I mean, this isn't new, but because of the publicity that it got and the sensitivity that we're dealing with, we want to make sure that it's right. So that's all
I can appreciate that, sir.
my concerns, and I believe the committee's concerns is with the policies and procedures that, again, aren't done yet, but when they are, we'll implement those before they will be passed and agreed upon before the system itself is up and running.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, is that all? Thank you, Jim. In your packets, the minutes of November 21st. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. 2017-0216.
Resolution number 2017-0216, making an award on requisition number 40136 to Celex ES in the amount not to exceed $870,338 for the fixed automated license plate recognition project for the period 12/1/2017 through 6/30/2021.
Thank you. Mrs. Carney.
Good afternoon, Council. Brandy Carney, Director of Public Safety and Justice Services. Thank you for hearing from us again today. I did just want to address specifically some of the concerns and items that were brought up at the last meeting. And I do want to say that we did in fact finish the policy for usage, the countywide policy for this system. Specifically from the last meeting, one of the questions that had came up was regarding the retention period. Within the policy, we did include a 365-day one-year retention period. That is the current retention period that we've had with the mobiles and has never been an issue since they've been live since 2010. Additionally, I did send an email out to all of the law enforcement participating, and they all did agree on the one-year retention period. We also checked the vendors database, as well as with the City of Cincinnati. Just for some context, Dayton Homeland Security Region 3 has a 2-year retention period on their LPR license plate readers. Columbus and their Region 4, so those counties, has a 1-year retention period. Toledo has a 1-year retention period, and Cincinnati, which includes contiguous counties around Hamilton, also has a 1-year retention period. So we did check those. So again, in the policy, we did include a 365-day retention. Something that came up at the last meeting was also the concerns that were addressed by the ACLU All four of those concerns that came up are in fact specifically addressed in the policy also. The first one of those was with respect to making sure that it was detailed who could use the system and why they should be using the system. Some examples that we did include in the policy was allowable and unallowable use of the system. Allowable use, for example, is terrorism prevention, investigation, crime prevention, investigation. Unallowable would be non-enforcement or personal use, harassment or intimidation, etc. And those are all spelled out within the policy. The second item that they brought up was to ensure that there was controlled, restricted access to the system and the database. We did include that in the system, as well as the software for the vendor that's being proposed does have that feature built into the system that that will be used. We included a general security provision, and that's to keep the data secure, things like the room that the data will be in, the server would be locked, things of that nature. Finally, one of the ACLU's comments was with respect to audit and tracking of users on the system. Again, the software for the vendor we're proposing does track who logs into the system, when they logged into the system, what they looked up, and so all of that is easily auditable or easily reportable if that was something we needed to do. And this policy will be sent out to everyone, and they will sign off on it that will be using or receiving one of the FLPRs. So those were some of the specific questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We did, the chief was nice enough to print out. We gave you, Councilwoman Baker had asked about specifically what you see, so we did give you a printout on that also.
What's the, maybe for the law department, what, for, it, I want to say, somebody using it without permission illegal, is that a felony?
I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure, but it's very serious or something if it's akin to like leads or using it without proper authority.
My understanding was it was exactly like leads, so illegal or non-permitted access should be subject to a felony.
We can confirm that.
If you could, I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Questions from the committee? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I guess I'm just a little confused as to why would we have years of this same device on cars and not have any references to objections, and yet doing it on a stationary pole seems to bring those type of concerns. So either, I guess I'm just curious as to, there must be a difference, I guess, is what I'm asking. There must be a difference between what's on a pole and what's on a car when we start talking about whether or not there are concerns about privacy.
Well,
So can
Councilwoman
you answer
Baker, as the chief had said previously, you know, you can take a mobile car to a certain area and keep that car in that area and track those plates, whereas the fixed, it stays on that pole and it's there. The only difference from my perspective is 8 years ago, we got a lot of Homeland Security money, and I think it was less publicized. It was just one of those things. You know, I don't know if it got the media attention that it did from the community 8 years ago. But with respect to the different types of systems, I don't see any. I don't know if Chief, you have anything for that?
The only thing that I would say is that your exact question, I was shocked when I learned that there was a controversy about this, and actually because I was the one apparently dumb enough to answer the phone when the media called, I got some hate emails and some hate phone calls, and I was kind of taken aback because we have been using this technology. The only difference is that now it's, you know, there's going to be more of them and it's going to be fixed on a pole. And it would be much easier, all those complaints that the ACLU said could possibly happen, or those violation of rights, would be easier with a moving vehicle because we can target anywhere we want in the car within our jurisdictions. Whereas this is, we pick locations and set criteria based on usefulness because of volume of traffic and potential terror targets and crime rates and everything around the county, and that's how we picked them. So, I don't understand myself why this is raising a stink when 8 years ago or so, when they were putting the mobile ones in, there wasn't.
You know, this was also brought up earlier, but there's cameras that stream 24/7 all over. The city of Cleveland alone has over 150 cameras that stream full-time 24/7. Communities all throughout Cuyahoga County, those aren't just pictures of a car, but those are constantly streaming. So sometimes, again, I just to put that out there, that they are out there.
May I just ask, just as a follow, if you had a choice of whether you would take the cameras on cars or cameras on poles, because this money that you receive from the grant is specifically for poles, or can it be used for additional cars?
We had went to the law enforcement committee because this was a request of them, of their group. They currently have the mobiles, and so when we went to Cincinnati, where it was successful, it was a combination of some of the fixed, some of the mobiles, and some other technologies. So we went to them, and we specifically asked Homeland Security to use this money for fixed. We are receiving money next year, and that was proposed as going back to the committee and asking them whether fixed or mobile or a combination of the two.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? And these are spots that were picked up by the cities themselves. Am I correct?
Each city that was interested presented intersections that they thought would be suitable.
Right.
That was pared down by public safety through their metric that they did based on, first of all, how many cameras we could probably afford with the amount of the grant. And then the second thing was to try to get every city at least one intersection. So some of the cities had presented up to 3 or 4 or more. And we decided to go, everybody gets one, and then pick the one based on the metric with proximity to terror, amount of traffic, what the tier 1 crimes were, et cetera, all the different criteria. And then they were presented and we accepted those.
Anyone else? Now, as far as the policy and procedures, when everyone signs off, could you get that to us? So we can become comfortable, and I would hope that we'd have that before these are up and running.
Absolutely.
Okay, what's your estimated time of these being in place and running?
So if the contract does move forward, the vendor had said first quarter, as early as January, but first quarter they could start the installs. Some of it depends on the weather, but we're hoping to have the installs done then by a 6-month period, so by the end of June.
Okay, so we have some time. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to director, do we have a list of where these cameras, the fixed ones, will be placed, like which cities, I guess, in Cuyahoga County? Because I'm assuming Cleveland is on its own, and these are for the suburbs, correct?
We do. Cleveland actually is receiving one of these cameras. They had requested right here at Progressive Field intersection. And then approximately a third of the communities. I had provided the list at the last meeting. I apologize I didn't bring it, but I'd be happy to share it with you when I get back to my office.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
On the retention of the license plate that is now on the vehicle, how long do we retain those?
The current retention period is the same as the one we're proposing for the fixed.
1 year?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we're only, through the chair, to continue on the point, so if we're only going to keep them for a year, what will happen with that data once the year is up?
Go ahead.
The way that the date and the time that it is read by a camera is logged. So the computer, it's a very simple thing. You just put into the software provided by the vendor that houses all the data. And whenever it meets the 365-day threshold, it would be purged. The only way that it wouldn't be purged is if there was an active investigation involving a specific plate or plates that that agency requested, please hold this longer than that.
And sometimes those type of cases, cold cases, so to speak, aren't looked at, information doesn't come up for years, so.
Right,
That information would be gone then, I guess, at
Correct.
that point.
That's why, there had been some talk, 30 days, 90 days. 6 months. I mean, sometimes what if you don't find that the crime occurred for 9 months? Then all the data would be gone. So this way, at least we have a possibility if something was picked up within a year. Say it was a body was found on the side of a highway behind an embankment or something like that, and the coroner said, or the medical examiner said it was from probably 7 months ago. We could go back and see if there was any reads from the nearest camera and try to backtrack and use that to figure out a possible suspect or suspect vehicle.
We're only able to see the license plate, not who's in the car as well.
You should have gotten pictures.
Yeah, but
do
I
have
don't,
black and white
I don't
ones.
see one that shows that you can see actually who's inside the car, because there's stolen cars all the time to do crimes.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not opposed, don't get me wrong, I'm just trying to fully understand what will the picture of the license plates, what is the main purpose? And the main purpose is for crimes, it's
Well,
not to
it
give
gives us-
tickets or issue any type of
No,
ticket.
it has nothing to do with traffic enforcement. This is it's solely for investigative. So even if it is a car, as you're proposing, most of the time people will steal a car and then use it to commit a crime. We now have at least possibly a car that's involved. From there, if we recover the car either with people in it, they become potential suspects, or we recover the car without people in it, and we pull DNA off of the steering wheel or the door handles, or there's blood in there because somebody was injured in the commission of the crime, then we have that data to continue investigating. So we could submit that DNA evidence and compare it to the DNA database for felons and see if perhaps we get a suspect that it gets a hit on. And then from there, it isn't, okay, we get this license plate and we solve the crime. It's still gonna be a long, painstaking process most of the time in order to solve whatever the crime happens to be, but at least it gives us an avenue, whereas before we would have nothing to follow up on unless there was a witness that came forward and said, hey, I saw a blue Buick and the first 3 letters of the plate were CRM. Then we would try to take it from there.
Through the director, how many cameras are we getting to cover, I would take it 59 communities?
So, to the chairwoman, we had put a request out to every law enforcement agency, municipal chief in the county. There was 20 locations, so 20 different municipalities responded, and I think it's approximately 72 cameras, because each location, we wanted 2 ways of traffic, and so depending on the size of the intersection, there were more, but those were the communities that responded. So it's not every single community in Cuyahoga County.
So that comes out maybe two cameras each community, or?
It depends. I think the location here that I spoke about that's very large by Progressive Field is approximately 12 cameras, or it's a large number. So it just depends. Some locations can use, 2 cameras, and some would need more depending on the intersection. And, but again, every community who asked for one is receiving at least 1 location through this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tuma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, just to the director and chief. So this is just another tool in crime fighting for law enforcement. Is that correct? And you can find exculpatory evidence as well if you're trying to rule
Correct.
people out.
We could find alibi. If somebody is a suspect and they say, no, I was here and there was a camera nearby and they may have gone by, we could also use it that way.
Right.
It is just another tool. It's no different than if we put a detective that was tailing somebody to see where they were going. If we had a lead on someone, it's just much easier because it's all computerized and it's easily searchable, at least by location, or if we get a plate or something like that where we can search it. And then again, it doesn't solve it for us. It only gives us
Right.
an avenue to take the next step where we are doing our face-to-face with people and talking to them, just like police officers have done since the 1800s.
Right. And to the director, I'm glad to hear that, you addressed some of the concerns, privacy concerns and ACLU and things like that. Because I know there are some folks out there who are always concerned about those, and rightfully so, understandably so. But I think the only people who have to really be worried in this situation are the bad guys. So I think it's a good thing for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at your picture on the front page, just to bring clarity is the picture taking the car, the make, the color, along with the license plate? I asked that first.
The data that is on the server is exactly what you're seeing. I don't know, I have 4 different pictures, I don't know which one
The
is
one
the
that,
first one. What's the
know,
plate number, the lower?
Right, so you have a picture of the plate that says Reed's. Is that all that's being recorded, or is it the entire car that we see, at least half of the car?
This, I had one of my officers driving around in our mobile one, and again, the fixed will be a little different, but the camera is geared in towards the license plate, but because it's a wide angle, it gets a little and then crops. So what you're seeing is exactly what you're gonna get from a read, and that's it. Now, I don't know if you have color pictures, I printed mine in black and white, but there is a color that is shown, but from there, we would have to take it further to find out what the make and model and number of doors and such, if it's not readily visible on that little
Right,
snapshot.
I guess my question is, what is recorded for a year? Is it just you crop it, have the license, and that's it?
It's the license plate, the one that zooms in on the plate, the little snapshot that it took that from, and then also the GPS information that includes the date, the time,
Location.
and the location, which camera it was that it came from.
So if, let's say, a Progressive Field, that's a highly populated area. You have a parade, or you have some event going on, and you have people sitting along the curb, maybe walking around, and you're taking these pictures. Are all those people in this picture?
The picture is only gonna go on the vehicles. If somebody was walking directly adjacent to the license plate, part of their body probably would be in the picture. If a pedestrian was actually in the roadway. But it's geared to look at the plate. It knows what a plate is, and it goes and tries to zoom in on that, and that's where it snaps the picture.
So when we see the lights in front, the headlights, and there's someone sitting on the curb watching whatever's going on, it's part of the day and innocently just there, are they also part of your picture then, or?
If in this particular picture that has HEQ 7478,
Yeah, I can't read it that, yes.
that
yes,
one,
yes,
it's
yes.
down underneath in the
Yes,
small
got it.
one. If to the left of the car, as if you're sitting in the driver's seat, if there was somebody standing against that embankment there, it would probably get them in the picture. As you can tell, the big picture is kind of blurry because it's zooming in on the plate and trying to get a good read there. It's kind of like when you focus, you can't focus far and near at the same time. It's trying to get the plate, so it's gonna be a little out of focus, but you might be able to tell a sex or a race maybe, but you wouldn't probably be able to identify a person.
Okay,
And of course, you know, with a plate, we can just go ahead and run it through leads and find out what at least the car it's supposed to be with. We wouldn't have any idea on the
Right.
person.
yeah, it's not the criminal I worry about, it's the bystanders that happen to be there that are unaware of what's around them and are just there for the day, for whatever reason. That's the privacy piece, I think, but that's with mobile or with stationary.
I would just say with stationary, mobile, you might have a parked car in a parking lot, and then you might be apt to have people, to your point. These fixed locations especially, these are largely intersections, and so again, other than someone in the middle of an intersection coming through, that's mostly where these are located.
Right, and these are public streets and
All of them,
sidewalks.
yep.
So, I mean, if it were going shooting into a house, I could see the argument a little bit there, but, like, going back, to if you're walking in Strongsville, you're probably on camera.
You're probably on a lot of
And
cameras.
that's kind of a good thing.
As with
further?
the bomb that went off during the marathon race, I think in Boston, they were looking for cameras that were there that took a wider scope so they could identify who was walking down that street. You know, that,
If you take that example, Councilwoman, with the live video cameras that they go back and look at the historical footage, they're looking for the people in wider angle. But if somehow during that it led to a license plate, then you could expand that if you have this network to see where is it picked up, and maybe if it's always showing up at one camera, maybe they live within a mile of that area, and it narrows it even further. So it could be used in conjunction with the live video if you somehow get a plate that you can associate with the suspect.
Right. And I would think if you were involved in a criminal act, the first thing you would say is, was there a camera nearby that took a picture of this crime? And, you know, that's the balance between protection and privacy is,
Nowadays,
trying
it's
to
hard
reach.
not to be on a camera, actually, and even to take it further from what Councilman Gallagher has said, you know, he is making mention of Strongsville. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office has a program where anybody that has their own surveillance cameras, whether it be a business or a resident, that might catch the outside of their business, they can register so that the police, if we have a crime, we know exactly who to go to say, hey, can we check your video to see if the guy ran through your backyard? Or some of them, like all my officers in Fairview, they know where the businesses are that have cameras that catch a little bit of Lorraine Road, which is our main drag. And they're hitting those businesses if somebody was fleeing a certain way in a car and seeing if they can get a, you know, number of doors, a color, if they can see anything, or the residents, if it's in a residential neighborhood, if our residents have cameras. We've actually had 2 or 3 cases where we've solved crimes because of a resident's cameras doing that.
Mr. Miller? Yes, sir.
Could you say something about the monitoring process and how many people, how much it takes in terms of resources to monitor these cameras and who pays for that?
So there's a database that collects each of the pictures. And again, as I stated in the policy, there's restricted access to the system. So the chief can maybe speak to his specific department, but there's no constant monitoring. If in fact something happens and he wants to look up a plate or happens to have a certain area, that's when they can go in the database and look. Or if there is a warrant, someone with a felony warrant that drove by that had been uploaded to the system, they would, either the local dispatch or an officer nearby could get notified in their vehicle. But as far as anyone just sitting there 24/7 and monitoring these, that's not something. That's the value of having the database that keeps the pictures available.
If you can just imagine, say, the location that Cleveland is getting, Ontario and Carnegie, there's, I believe, 16 lanes total. The number of plates that go by in a day, I mean, our database is going to fill up, and all it is going to be is just basically a digital file unless somebody requests to look at it for some reason. And we have to have, we can't, either we're looking for a location to see what went by because something happened nearby, or we have a plate or a partial plate that we're trying to backtrack the other way and link it and find out if it went by somewhere.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
To the chair, to the director, is there any thought given to maybe putting disclaimers on the polls, or is this something you want to do secretly? But Councilman Gallagher said he knows he has cameras in Strongsville. You know, kind of like the McDonald's coffee. They didn't have the disclaimer, and somebody was able to sue. Of course, you should have known that coffee is hot, but it now has a disclaimer. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the Privacy Act, putting a sticker on the pole saying, hey, you could be possibly monitored
Sure.
and saved for any.
We don't have plans to. They are cameras, and as we've been talking about, cameras seem to be everywhere anymore. They're on top of the pole. It's not like, you know, they're hidden, or I think people would be able to see them, but they are there, and we did not plan on putting additional signage for those.
And then for Amber Alerts, so in Amber Alert cases, this would be something that would really be a beneficial tool. to
Absolutely.
actually-
The dispatch center would immediately put that into the system, and if it went by any of these locations, it would immediately notify dispatch or a local officer how it was programmed.
Just for that, I'm on board. We have to protect our kids.
It would show up right on their mobile data terminal, ma'am.
'Cause
Because
I
all
know-
the officers will have access to the software, and it'll show, you know, this with
Or
an
just
alert.
any abduction, because the crime or forensic people, they know down to a science, you know, when you're abducted, what age you are, and what's the viability of you coming back alive. So I think this will actually help in that. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Well, I think we've covered it A to Z. And Chief, I would maybe ask you a favor. I know the Reverend's a little upset about what this is. I think she might be a little confused as to what we're doing. So I'm gonna ask the chief if you have any questions, he'd be so kind as to lend his expertise to you to make it seem a little bit more palatable. But as this committee is concerned, we'll be moving forward with Resolution 2017-0216. If everyone's in order, I'll accept a motion for third reading.
So move.
A second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? And that's with the understanding we'll have the policies and procedures before they're up and running. Okay.
Absolutely, thank
And
you.
if you could keep us in the loop as to where we're at and when you think you're gonna go live, so we'll at least be in that loop.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Miscellaneous business? Other public comment?
Reverend Pinckney.
Reverend?
I'm Reverend Pamela M. Pinckney Butts, and I'm not confused about anything I said, and I'm not confused about any questions I asked. And the ACLU is not any consolation to me because the ACLU has destroyed all of my complaints that I have filed with the agency and has refused to assist me. So the ACLU is no consolation for me. And if I say there's foul play, there's foul play. I'd like to know, because some people believe my tears are a sign of weakness, but they're not. These are my grandchildren. See these babies right here? I want to know what children you're protecting. And I'd like to know, Councilman Gallagher, since my representative refuses to cooperate with me and communicate with me and do anything on my behalf, I'd like to know, at what point is something considered to be terrorism? Because terrorism to me is when I'm held captive under a civil protection order, when false people supposed to be law enforcement officers and case managers go into a school, steal my children, tell them I gave them away, hold me captive, rob me of my baby, and I never get my children back. Is that terrorism? Because I'd like to know why I never got my children back, but you're sending out license plates for missing children, missing people, missing and exploited people. But when I mention something about my situation,
Okay.
I'm confused.
Okay, thank you.
No, my
yes.
3 minutes is not up yet.
Ma'am,
my
your
3
time-
minutes is not
ma'am,
up yet, and I'd
ma'am,
like to have an answer,
thank
and
you
I'd like to
very much.
have you,
We're adjourned.
I'd like to have you